Welcome, everybody. I appreciate you all being here today. I know especially an incredibly busy time. And first, I'd like to congratulate everybody here on making it successfully through the first week of classes. That was a big lift for all of you and for all of us. So well done around the Zoom room. So today, what we wanted to do the week before classes started, some of you had joined us for the Welcome Back Town Hall that we did for academic affairs and answered a lot of questions about the mask requirement and how that was going to impact classes and how to manage some of the more challenging situations that masking requirement might actually pose. And so there were a lot of concerns that came up, very good concerns and valid concerns that came up in that first meeting. And so what we wanted to do was very quickly put together another town hall to continue answering those questions and the concerns that have come up in the first couple weeks of class, but also to give you some strategies and some tips on how to manage some of those more difficult classroom situations. So we'll go around the room. Well, not everybody in here, but I just want to introduce the guest speakers today. I'm Karen Appleby. I'm serving as our interim provost and vice president of academic affairs. And let's see, Lynn, I'll pass it over to you. Lynn.
Hello, everybody. Lynn Reddington, Vice President for Student Affairs and Enrollment Management. It is so good to see all of you here. Rick.
Hello, I'm Rick Pongratz. I'm Director of Counseling and Testing Service, and I'm excited to be here and have a conversation.
Craig.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Craig Chatrand. I am the Dean of Students here at ISU and really happy to participate in this conversation today.
Thanks, Craig. And Rex?
Hi, everybody. Rex Forrest, Vice President for Health Sciences.
And thank you all for being here today. Academic Affairs and Student Affairs is jointly hosting this town hall today. So we have a mix of Academic Affairs and Student Affairs folks here with us. And we also have our moderator today, Darren Blackburn. Darren, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. We're going to ask you to make sure your mics are muted. And if you have questions, please hold those until after the presentation. I'll be collecting those via chat. You can send that either directly, do a direct to myself, or you can send it to everyone in the chat feature. Instructions will be published momentarily.
Thank you, Darren. So I have shared my screen with you all. Can everybody see that? Excellent. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start with a COVID health update that Rex is going to provide for us. And then we'll move over to Craig. Craig is going to talk to us about strategies for managing disruptive classrooms. And then Rex and I are going to finish the presentation today with some thoughts and some strategies for supporting students during COVID. So Rex, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Dr. Appleby. Welcome, everybody. Just to provide with a quick COVID health update. I know that we're all sort of numb to the health updates related to COVID, but I will say that Idaho is experiencing fairly dramatic and substantial increases in COVID cases and in hospitalizations, ICU admissions, people on the ventilator, which are obviously those severe cases of COVID. And unfortunately, what's likely to follow are some increases in deaths from COVID. Our health institutions are operating at near the top of their capacity. This situation is putting individuals that are working in those health facilities not only at risk, but at substantial levels of stress and difficulty in managing just the workload that they have in many of these health institutions. And so, we're going to be talking more and more on campus, I think, about ways that the campus can adapt to the situation that we're in while still trying to preserve as much face-to-face as is potentially safe and effective for the educational environment. The campus has experienced the last 2 weeks about 30 cases of COVID. This is in students and faculty and staff and across our 3 primary campuses, that is Pocatello, Meridian, and Idaho Falls. That is substantially higher than where we were 2 weeks into the semester last fall. And based on projections in Idaho from the Department of Health and Welfare, we are expected to see increasing cases well into October based upon the low vaccination rates that are still present in our greater community and based upon the highly infectious Delta variant. The Delta variant is believed to be about 60% more infectious than the Alpha variant, the primary variant that we were dealing with last year. This results in more transmissions per individual infected and more rapid spread. There also is what's called a higher viral load with this virus, which means that individuals who are infected are carrying more virus particles, and that contributes to that infectiousness. So utilizing face coverings in the classroom is extremely important. And on a campus that's largely unvaccinated, or at least does not mandate vaccines like ours, there is at least an optional guidance from the CDC for even vaccinated folks and folks that are outdoor, and when you're outdoors, to be wearing face coverings. And I think that's a reasonable thing to do if people have concerns. The other aspects of this really relate to, and we'll talk more about this, making sure that we're flexible in the classroom, and that we are absolutely encouraging the reporting of cases to our contact tracing team. It isn't simply to keep track of the number of cases on campus. Contact tracing is a very, very important disease mitigation tool because it isolates and quarantines individuals, and which is very, very important with a highly infectious virus like we're talking about here. So we'll talk more about some of these other interventions as we move forward, Karen, but we certainly are in a situation where regardless of what people want to be doing today, we unfortunately need to be thinking about COVID and addressing that as we interact with students and other members of the campus community.
Thank you, Rex. And so just like in all of the other town halls, we will hold questions until the end. So if you have some COVID specific questions, you can send those to Darren in the chat and we'll address those at the end. So I'm going to turn it over to Craig. And Craig, I've got your slides. So if you'd want to just tell me next, if I miss one, we can do it that way. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'm going to talk in general about working with disruptive situations or disruptive students, and we're going to talk about different types of situations, and then really towards the end talk about some really specific things related to COVID and wearing a mask in the classroom. But in my experience, there's a couple different types of disruptive students. They're the ones who just really like to disrupt class. They're rarely on topic. The class con likes to gather attention and really gets in the way of your teaching and other students' learning. There are students who want to challenge you every point, every grade, every paper quiz, and they end up eating away class time or other time that students are trying to connect with you or learn from you. And then we have students who make inappropriate comments, and these can range from comments that are pretty directly challenging to the material you're teaching, but if that's still on topic, I wouldn't necessarily categorize that as disruptive, but comments that are racist, sexist, homophobic, questions that are wildly off topic, those types of disruptions really get challenging as well for faculty members. And then there's students who just want to monopolize your time. They don't have a person to process their concerns with, or they think you're the person to help them manage some of their life's concerns. So these are the different types of disruptive students that I tend to categorize. So if you want to go to the next slide, when we're working with students who are challenging or a situation that's disruptive, there's some balances that we need to try to establish. And this is really what we strive to do through the student conduct system. We need to balance the individual rights with the learning of the greater community. Students on our campus have rights, but they also have a responsibility to our community. We have to balance the level of support and assistance we provide with the rigor of our classes and our degrees. We can't take down the rigor to help students along. We need to support them to meet the expectations and the rigor. And so some of the rights that I always like to talk about in talking about challenging situations, when our students come onto our campus, they bring all the rights that other citizens have with them. They don't stop at our campus boundaries. And so our students still have the freedom of speech on our classroom or in our classrooms. You might not like some of their opinions. You might not like some of their feelings or thoughts, but we can't punish them for that. What we should be trying to do is assess the learning or the skill acquisition they have, but their freedom of speech continues on our campuses. The next one that I talk about is Fourth Amendment and search and seizure. This is really applicable to a lot of our friends in the residence halls, but even in the classroom. We are agents of the state, and we can't just search students for evidence. If we think a student did something or has something in their backpack, we're not able to just demand a student open up their backpack or empty their pockets or those type of things. There's some limits to what we can do there. And then the biggest one that I talk about is the right to due process. Our students have a right to be notified of our rules, to be notified that they may have violated our rules, and they have a right to provide their version of events before any action is taken against them. And so we're not able to just disenroll a student from a course or from the university without providing due process. And that's a lot of what we do through the student conduct system, and the way that our conduct system is structured by nature follows the due process guidelines that we have. So some strategies for working with students who are being disruptive or challenging situations. The first thing that I would encourage is any chance you have to talk to a student one-on-one, that always is a better way to do it. There are times where you have to immediately stop behavior in front of a classroom, but to say something like, for that student whose comments are inappropriate or off the topic, to be able to say, okay, we're going to bring class back to topic X. That's what we're talking about, and then carrying that on, and then afterwards try to talk to that student in a one-on-one setting. The two, I think, most important tools that you have is your tone of voice and the words you choose to use. Your tone of voice is so incredibly powerful. If you talk loud, if you talk with intensity, that's going to ramp up a situation. But if you can calm your voice and if you can talk quietly, talk soothingly, that helps a situation. It helps de-escalate, it helps calm things down. Similarly, the choice of words that you use is really important. In a disruptive situation or a student who's being confrontational, try to keep your words pretty bland. Try your hardest to refrain from using really extreme language. That's just going to sort of fuel that that negative interaction. So a calm tone of voice, a fairly bland but upfront word choice, I think is really important. Being able to use some reflexive listening skills. So to be able to mirror back to a student what they said to you, and to be able to say, I understand that you're tired of wearing a face mask and you don't believe that we should be able to require it. We're all frustrated by this. So reflect, be reflexive in listening, parrot back what a student says to you to validate their concern. You can say, I understand what you're saying, but we do have to abide by the policy or whatever the topic is. Being able to have appropriate boundaries with students is something that I think is critical, especially for that student who wants to engage you in conversation and not stop, whether it's about some of the life challenges that they have, or if they want to just argue with you in the middle of class, being able to say, this isn't the time for that. We can talk about that later. And being able to have some pretty firm boundaries about what types of conversations you'll engage in the classroom is really important. And then my favorite strategy, in a situation that is challenging, just blame someone else. And I invite you to blame me anytime you need to. And this is really useful when it comes to enforcing the mask requirement. Right? You can always tell a student, yeah, I understand this is frustrating. It's a pain for me too, but the dean of students is making me do this. And so I don't have a choice. If you have a problem with it, go talk to him. I think blaming someone else really helps in the moment. And there's a lot of truth to it too. We have asked as an institution that everybody wear a face mask. And so we're asking you to enforce that in your classroom. But if a student has a problem with that, it's really easy to say, well, someone else is making you enforce this. It's not up to you, and send them to me or a department chair or somebody else. So we put together we tried to make some fairly basic steps for mask enforcement. So the first thing, just try to approach a student who might not be wearing a face mask in normal, appropriate conversation. How's your day going? Are you enjoying class, or whatever normal interactions you would have with somebody either before or class or in the hallway. And then one of my favorite phrases is to say, I noticed you don't have a face mask on today. Do you have one with you that you can put on? I noticed you don't have a face mask. Would you go and find one and then come back to class? But starting out with I noticed is I think a pretty calm and appropriate way to enter into that type of conversation. And if that's not working, if a student says, yeah, I forgot it. No, I don't have one. I'm sorry you forgot it today. I'm going to have to ask you not to participate today, but please remember it for our next class because I really want you here. And then if the student at that point isn't responding, to acknowledge, validate some of what they're experiencing. I understand how frustrated you are, but if you can leave now, we can schedule a time to talk about this later. And I think 99% of our situations are going to be resolved in steps 2, 3, and maybe sometimes 4. It's I think it's going to be pretty rare that we're going to get to this to step 5. But if a student refuses to wear a face covering and they refuse to leave your class, simply don't hold class for that class session. That feels like a pretty extreme measure, but that's the guidance that we're giving faculty members. And if there's a situation where a student repeatedly is not wearing a mask, or in the event that somebody has to cancel a class period because somebody won't wear a face mask, please report that to my office right away. And if you go to the Dean of Students website, on the left-hand side, we have a button that says report a concern, and that goes into And I'm going to put the Dean of Students website also into the chat, but that form comes directly to our office, and we will start dealing with that just as fast as we can. Also, as a side note, you can use that form for other concerns. If you're concerned about a student who is struggling with a mental health concern, struggling with food insecurity, you can report concerns, any concern through that. So those are my my suggestions and some of the tips that I hope you find beneficial. And I'll turn it back over to Karen and Rex now.
Thanks, Craig. Some great suggestions, and I'll follow up actually on some of those. What Rex and I wanted to provide for you today is some more specific details on an email that we sent out to all of the faculty on Monday. And Darren, if we have access to that email, maybe we could put that in the chat. Just about how to accommodate students when they have absences due to COVID. What are student responsibilities? What are faculty responsibilities in those situations? But I wanted to start out just by Inside Higher Ed published a survey that they did with about 2,000 students. So it's not a huge survey, but there were some interesting quotes that I wanted to pull out that you can see here that really help frame the conversation that what is our responsibility for our students at this time, and what are the students' responsibility in their learning at this time. And I think those two areas are holistic student support and how can we provide that as faculty, and then what is the student responsibility. Just this first quote to me, this is from a student: to me, being successful in colleges is taking classes, being fulfilled. During this time, I believe the best things for colleges to do are stress counseling and communication, because this pandemic has caused problems for people everywhere. I think one of the things that we have learned, I was just in a big meeting with some of the other provosts across the state, and we talked about what we've learned through COVID. I'm sure many of you have had some of those same conversations. But one of the things that we've learned is I think we've all gotten to know each other on a different level. Obviously, keeping those professional boundaries very sometimes as clear as we can, but we've learned the challenges that our students might have that we may never have known had COVID not happened. They're caretaking for others. We are caretaking for others. What are their responsibilities in terms of work? And so just recognizing that your students do have all of these other outside responsibilities can help in sort of managing some of the classroom protocols that we can put in place to support them if they can't be in class due to COVID-related or life-related circumstances. Students also have a great responsibility in their learning. This is a student who was defining success in college. This person said success in college is less about the resulting grade or diploma and more about responsibility. Has this foray into the college atmosphere and academic growth in the subject area caused me to be more responsible with the opportunities that have been given to me? And so I want to talk about those two areas just very quickly. In terms of our responsibility in really supporting our students holistically, the first thing that I think is very important, and it's always important, not just in COVID times, but it's to know what are the resources we have available to students. We have a resource-rich campus, and many of our main resource providers are here with us today. We have counseling and testing services, disability services, student success center, where students can get tutoring, academic tutoring, reading and writing support, or writing and math support, excuse me, the registrar's office, academic advising. All of those resources are areas. Craig talked about the student who comes in and wants to, kind of just unload his or her life story. And that does happen, because to some students, you are the one person who they feel comfortable doing that to, or talking with about those types of things. It's really our responsibility to recognize that this student may need to go down to counseling and testing and help them get that support if they need that. So if you don't know how to access these resources, we will provide access to those. And the Office of Student Affairs and Lynn last year created a great document that sort of had all of those contact areas, so we can get those out to all faculty. But students are needing that support more and more, so just make sure you're prepared for that. In terms of curricular flexibility, we are in, I mean, I've been teaching in higher ed now for 23 years. There hasn't been a semester that's gone by where I haven't had to accommodate a student for something. It may have been an illness, it may have been something that happened in his or her life. And I know you all are the same. I mean, we are well aware of how to accommodate students, but it is incumbent upon us right now to provide this flexibility for our students when they or if they have tested positive for COVID. And that's not just for our students, but it's for our larger public health. It's for the community of health on our campus in Pocatello and in our other areas where Idaho Falls, Twin Falls, Meridian, and Anchorage. And so we are encouraging faculty. This is not a requirement, but we are strongly encouraging faculty to use alternative methods when students can't make it into class. If you have a Zoom option and you are able to use a Zoom option or some type of other remote instruction, that's probably the best thing to do. Then they don't have to miss class. If that's not a possibility, can you record lectures or provide notes for the student? If you are not familiar with or do not know how to record your lectures, we have an excellent service in our Instructional Technology Resource Center who will help you record all of your lectures. We have a recording studio, very high quality. You can produce some excellent recorded lectures and video time in their office. Think about, if it's appropriate, extending assignment deadlines or putting together pedagogically appropriate makeup work. I know this is additional time and work on your part, but it is our responsibility right now to our students, not only the students who need this, but to the other students in the class to make sure that we can support our students' learning during this time. The ITRC also offers online proctoring for tests and exams. So if a student can't come in for a test or an exam, there can be a way that they can do an online proctor, have an online proctor take the test at home or wherever they are where they're quarantining. We have a number of other pieces of information about screening sites on campus, testing sites, and our self-report form on the Academic Affairs website. I've linked that right here. So if you want to take a look at that in all of your free time right now, please do. And just know what resources are available to our students and to you and to everybody in your area. So I'll finish off today, and then Rex, jump in whenever you want about student responsibility. So I just loaded a lot of responsibility on all of our faculty and all of our staff to really help students get the support that they need at this time. But students also have a responsibility, and I would encourage each one of you to talk to your students about their responsibility in their own learning in classes. They are adult learners. And as you know, they have a lot of responsibility in what they learn. It should be expected. I mean, obviously none of us know if or when we might get COVID or get sick or something terrible might happen in our lives. But it is their responsibility to communicate with you in advance and throughout the time that they're gone to make sure that you're on the same page with the accommodation that they might need at that time. And if they're having any challenges or struggles with that, that they let you know. They also, I'm going to go back to something that Craig said, I think that is really, really important is it's really important for us to impress upon our students that they are a contributing member to our campus community. They are responsible not only for their own learning, but for also the learning of others in their classrooms. Many of us have classrooms that are active learning environments. Missing one person can make a big impact on the classroom. So, we want them to engage as much as possible, but they also have to have respect for the health and safety of others on our campus community. And that's where the self-reporting form comes in. If they have been in contact with somebody, or if they have tested positive, it is essential that they know they need to self-report and quarantine based on their doctor's guidelines and all of the guidelines that we have offered. That is a responsibility we all have to each other right now. So Rex, anything you wanted to add to those pieces?
Well, maybe just to add on a little bit. I think it's fair to say that any interaction with our students or with our colleagues is a little different today than it has been 18 months ago. And I think that everybody has been affected by COVID, some very, very dramatically, some politically, but it is a charged environment that we're working in, that we're interacting with our students in, and that we're interacting with others in. And I have seen it across campus, that the general frame of mind of all of us is affecting our own interpersonal interactions with our colleagues and with our students. So I guess, going back to some of the things that Craig was saying, the tone of voice, the taking a deep breath before we react to things, the waiting to press send on that terse email that we're sending to somebody, all of those things I think are really, really important in terms of upping our game, in terms of being considerate to one another and being supportive of the difficulties that so many people are facing. There is a ton of stress and anxiety out there. There is, students, it's stressful to start college anyway, let alone under extreme conditions that we're operating in here. And frankly, with the history of the last 18 months, many of these people have dealt with personal heartache and heartbreak related to COVID, and they unfortunately likely will continue to. So I guess I'm just adding on to what you and Craig said in terms of our ability to be supportive, to point them to the right resources. And Rick, I don't want to put you on the spot, but obviously you are at the Counseling and Testing Center encountering this kind of thing on a daily basis. And if there's anything you'd like to add in terms of how we approach these issues and how we approach one another, I think would be great.
Sure, I'm happy to. Thank you. And I just want to really echo what you're saying there about all the divisions that we're experiencing, as well as the additional strain that all of us, regardless of how you approach the issue of masks or COVID or vaccines or whatever, we're all feeling a lot right now, and that makes it harder for us to maybe have the grace needed to engage in some of these conversations that are helpful. There's research on how to do this. So for those of you who are interested in that, I'll share a link in the chat here to the American Psychological Association. There's a podcast with a researcher who does a lot of research on having difficult conversations with people who vehemently disagree with you. So feel free to check that out. But our students are really struggling right now. And so when you're talking to them, they maybe have less bandwidth for sitting back and contemplating all the different sides to an issue. About 21% of the students we've seen in the last 2 weeks in the counseling center say the sole reason they're coming to counseling is because of COVID-19. 16% of them say they've lost someone due to COVID. Someone's died from COVID. And 71% of the students we've seen in the last 2 weeks are talking about how their mental health is much worse now because of COVID. So it's very much real for them. And just as it's real for all of you, my guess is we'd have similar statistics from all of us if we were to take that role. So I just encourage folks to have compassion with themselves and with one another as we're going through some rough times in the next couple months.
Thank you, Rex, and thank you, Rick. So I think at this point, we'd like to open it up for questions. So Darren, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, we have our first question for Karen. If the COVID situation worsens, how far out will we know if we have to transition to online?
That's a great question, and I wish that I could give you a solid answer. Obviously, this environment right now is fluid. It changes rapidly. And so if I could give a timeline, that would be great. What I can promise you is that if we get to a situation where we are planning to move to a remote-based instruction, we will let you know as soon as we make that decision. And we will figure out a way to provide some flexibility and some time to make that transition happen. But you will know as soon as we make that decision and as soon as we can get that communication out.
I would just add Karen, that I think it's important that we hope for the best and plan for the worst. And I think that we have already had to convert at least some sections, some courses, some individual lectures to a Zoom format. And I think that people should be incorporating those kinds of thoughts into what they do and how they're preparing for lecture now, because I feel like there's a decent possibility that we're going to see increased cases and that the university is going to have to respond in some way. We're already doing that. As I said before, on the first day of class, we had some faculty that had to be on Zoom because they were in fact having to quarantine or isolate, and then students as well. So being able to be flexible, like Karen outlined on that slide, with Zoom options, online, recorded lectures, all of those things. And we haven't mentioned the importance of potentially having seating charts. And I would encourage people to have seating charts if they can manage that in their classroom to assist with contact tracing, because we certainly won't want to have to come into a classroom because we can't figure out where people were, basically ask that class to be suspended for live face-to-face kind of instruction. And that is very possible. It actually has happened in some programs already in the first couple of weeks. So I guess, Karen, just to add to what you're saying, I think we need to be prepared and to be thinking about these things, recognizing that it may not happen. It may happen in a month or 2 months, but it's possible that it could happen and require some sort of transition in how we're delivering some of these courses.
Okay, Rex, since you're on camera, I'm going to give you the next question. It is difficult for students to hear me during instruction when I wear a face covering. Why can't I wear a face shield if I'm socially distancing from the students?
So, first of all, we've learned a lot about the effectiveness of different types of face coverings over the last 18 months or so. And it's pretty clear from an evidence perspective that a cloth face mask is the preferred way to mitigate disease spread. It protects not only those we're speaking with, but those that are speaking to us. So it's a two-way protection. Face shields are not as effective. And I guess my suggestion in this situation is, could we figure out a way to project the voice better with a microphone and speaker system, or with some other way of delivering the lecture that could amplify your voice rather than changing the face covering modality. Now, I will also say that there are a few individuals who have significant accommodations that need to be made for wearing a mask. And if you happen to be one of those individuals, our disabilities office is happy to talk with you about that. Some people feel very claustrophobic. Some people have breathing difficulty with a mask on, and we certainly want to accommodate that. The other option, and we have suggested this to some, and I know that this isn't a great answer, so don't necessarily come after me, but Zoom may be a better option if we're really having difficulty and don't have the technology in the classroom to be able to project your voice better, that you could do it on Zoom and presumably many people could hear you. I know that's not an optimal response, however.
Darren, I just want to jump in really quickly. Something that to what Rex, add on to what Rex was saying, and also address something Craig said earlier. This is not so much about your students not hearing you, but if you need things in your classroom, a microphone, Rex just brought that up, or I'm thinking of Craig's earlier example of the student who may have forgotten his or her face mask. If you need, we should have extra face masks. We probably don't have extra microphones running around, right? So if you need a microphone or something like that, contact your chair. Your chair can get that coordinated, and we can work to get some of that technology in your classroom. But we have ample supplies, extra masks, those types of things. I would hate for a student to miss a class because he or she forgot a mask. So if there are disposable masks that you need, get an abundance of those, and we can get those to you. So just as an FYI.
Okay, this next question is for Craig. To whom do I report classroom disturbances to when I feel the students have crossed the line?
You can always report those incidents to the Dean of Students office. And earlier I put in the website to the Dean of Students office. The website on the left hand, there's a button that says report a concern. And you can just fill out the form that is connected to that button. That comes straight into our office and straight into our staff. Another way that you can report to our office is just email deanofstudents@isu.edu. We, again, monitor that email all the time. And then you can always call our office as well. We're happy to try to chat with you and consult on particular situations. That's something that we do quite a bit of. Talk to myself or one of our many staff members here. We're happy to help in whatever ways that we can.
And if I might add on to that again, sorry for all the add-ons, but that's incredibly important. And if you do have a student in your classroom who has crossed a line, it's also very important to let your chair know that. And if you are the chair, please let your dean know that as well. So not only letting the Dean of Students know, but also letting your academic department know appropriately.
And one of the reasons that's so important is because a student might be having a challenge in your class, but your chair or your dean may have heard of a challenge that they're presenting in another class. In my office, maybe I hear about a challenge that the student's presenting to you, but maybe Jesse Sears and I have already talked about a student because public safety has had interactions with them as well. It helps us connect the dots and it helps us support a student the best way possible and have the most effective interventions that we can when we have more information. And like I said, connecting those dots.
Okay, Karen, this question is for you. Are instructors authorized to choose to do Zoom instead of live face-to-face? The impression given was that going in person was preferred and highly suggested method of instruction. Zoom was not a favorable solution.
Sure. So we want to, at this moment, try our best to preserve our face-to-face classrooms as much as we possibly can. However, if there are significant concerns, if, for example, you have a health concern, or if somebody in your household has a health concern that your situation has changed, for example, and you want to change instructional modalities, the first person to talk to is your chair. And again, if you're the chair, the dean, and then we can work those out for you. However, what we would like, at least right now, is we would like for the chair to know if a faculty member would want to and is making that instructional change.
Okay. Rex, the question is for you. At what point does the university mandate vaccination?
So we have had that question a lot, and I totally understand it, but we're also a state entity that is working under the governor's executive order that precludes us from having vaccine requirements or a vaccine mandate or a vaccine passport type of a program. So I don't see that as a viable thing in the state of Idaho. I think that there are some states, some institutions, some private businesses that have been able to successfully mandate that. And it clearly is helpful to have a vaccine mandate from a public health perspective and a disease spread perspective. Unfortunately, we have some constraints on our ability to roll that kind of a program out.
Okay, the next question is also for you, Rex. A student who came to class without a mask asked if I had one, but I could not see any in the classroom. Who do I contact to ask for masks to be stocked into my classroom?
So facilities should be able to assist with that. We've got a lot of face coverings in our stockpile in a place called the Bengal Depot. And facilities should be able to help with that kind of thing. You can either work directly with them or work through your chair.
I would also just throw out that a lot of the offices across campus have stockpiles of disposable masks. So if you are in College of Business, I know that the dean's office there has boxes of disposable masks. If you're teaching a class in Gravely, we have some. They can come to the counseling center and get masks. So in a pinch, that'll work too. But it's great to have a lot more on hand.
Darren, can I jump in with a question for just 1 second?
Mhm.
So somebody sent me a direct message and asked, what happens if our class periods are longer than the average hour or hour and a half? I can't cancel class for an entire day. And you're absolutely right. A lot of there are different parts of our campus where students are in class for an entire day. Sometimes we have labs that go quite a bit longer. And so if you're in a situation where somebody's not wearing a face mask and it's not reasonable or plausible to cancel class for an entire day, I think it's very reasonable to say we're going to take a 30-minute break and everybody grab your stuff, go do whatever you need to do for 30 minutes. We're going to start again in 30 minutes. Ask the student who's being disruptive to stay behind and try to have that one-on-one reasonable conversation with them at that point. And if you're still not getting anywhere, you can call our office or ask public safety for some assistance as students start reassembling. But again, if you were to dismiss class and then have students come back in 30 minutes, I think anybody who's been disrupted, that's going to have enough time for them to cool down, realize they're making a pretty substantial mistake and not come back to the classroom until they're prepared with a face mask and the other items that you have. So for classes that go all day or that are longer than the traditional class, that's the advice that I would give to those faculty members.
Craig, since you're on, I have another question for you. What screening requirements do students have to follow through with, and what happens if they don't?
Sure, and I'll ask Rex to fill in any spots that I miss, but we're asking our student athletes and our students in our on-campus housing to go through a screening program where we're going to screen them once a week, and this is asymptomatic screening. And so students without any symptoms, once a week, we're asking them to do this. And students can be exempt from that screening requirement if they are vaccinated or if they have another exemption or accommodation. Medical or religious are the most common ones. And so that's the main program that we have right now. And if students don't follow that, they're going to get a lot of opportunities to comply with our request. And after about the third time that we ask them and remind them to do it, they're going to have a conversation with somebody in housing or somebody in my office that's going to be pretty direct and ask, what's the barrier? How can we help remove that barrier? And if somebody simply says, I just refuse, then we'll have a conversation about other options they might have about participating in their education on our campus and where they might, how they can access their education, but maybe that might not be physically on campus if that's appropriate for the situation. Rex, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, just a couple little things. We also utilize screening to allow people out of quarantine early. And so we utilize our screening program as part of our contact tracing process to get people out of quarantine, back onto campus, back into class, if they can screen out of quarantine. We also may have certain situations where we might need to screen a larger group just because of disease activity on campus. And so we may bring those folks in. Craig is absolutely right. Our screening center in the vocational arts building is for asymptomatic individuals. People who are ill have a couple of options. We would prefer that those folks go to University Health, especially students. But we also have, you may recall, we had a screening site at Holt Arena for most of last academic year. That similar screening site, Jesse Sears has collaborated with SIF, Southeast Idaho Public Health, and Express Lab to stand up a new community screening site at the Eames building up on Alvin Ricken Drive. It's a drive-up site. They have testing available for folks. The access to that is free of charge. They may charge your insurance, but you're not going to get charged if you don't have insurance, I guess is what I'm saying. And so there should be no reason why people who might feel like they're ill shouldn't be tested or screened. So that's all I would add, Craig.
Okay, the next question is also next to or for you, Rex. Where are vaccination clinics taking place?
So we have vaccine clinics available at our screening site in the VOTEC building on Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays at the present time. It's usually during the middle of the day, and I'm sorry, I don't have the exact hours, but if you show up between, say, 10 o'clock and 1 o'clock over the lunch hour, you can walk in and get a vaccine. Bengal Pharmacy, which is above the Student Health Center, also has vaccines available. You can go to their website and you can schedule an appointment. And I would imagine that you wouldn't have to wait very long if you just walked up, but they do sometimes have a short wait, so it's good to schedule that. We did a variety of different sort of pop-up clinics around campus over the last couple of weeks. We vaccinated a couple hundred individuals, or close to a couple hundred. We continue to vaccinate. I just got the report. There were 10 people today that were vaccinated. So we're nibbling away at this issue, and we will continue to. The vaccine committee is also working on setting up a vaccine clinic in the student union building that will be there most days to be able to capture folks out of that high traffic area. So that's how we're dealing with vaccination. Lots of access. If you're interested in more community-wide access, not being vaccinated on campus, Southeast Idaho Public Health has plenty of vaccine for everybody.
Okay, and the next question I have for you, what are the current travel restrictions? Do we have any?
We do not have any current travel restrictions other than what's mandated by the CDC. There are some travel restrictions related to international travel. And some of those are imposed by the US, and some of those are imposed by the country that you're traveling to. But at the present time, the university does not have travel restrictions at our current operational level.
Okay, the next question is also for you. It's more of a policy question. If we can mandate screening, why can't we mandate vaccinations? Aren't these functionally the same thing?
Well, I mean, there's certainly complementary disease mitigation efforts. And, we have found that breakthrough infections, even in folks that are vaccinated, that those can be mitigated by wearing a face covering. But they're not really quite the same thing. They, as I say, are complementary. I talked earlier about the governor's executive order related to vaccine mandates, and that's really the reason we're not mandating vaccination.
Okay, those are all the questions I currently have. If you'd like to send, we have a few more minutes. If you'd like to send any more in, please do so, and I will get them posted. Karen, are there any other remarks you'd like to pass on?
There aren't. I just want to thank everybody today for providing guidance and for attending and for everything that you're doing for our students and to keep our campus community very safe. I know this is challenging. It's a very challenging time. And we are committed to communicating more rather than less. So you're probably getting more emails in your inbox than you've ever wanted from academic affairs, student affairs, the president's office, but it's because we want to make sure that we are communicating very consistently with the campus community. So if there are any questions that you have after this, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. And Craig mentioned earlier, if you need somebody to blame for masks, you can blame him. You can blame me too. That's fine. I'm happy to take that blame. I'm happy to talk to students at any time. So any other questions pop up, Darren?
Yeah, I have one more, and then we'll close it off with Lynn. Rex, this is for you. If we should move to completely remote teaching situation this year, will there be an effort to return to physical spaces back to socially distanced?
So those decisions have been discussed. The rooming for spring semester has to occur in very, very short order. In fact, within the next few days. And so when we talk about going back to a COVID capacity, it's a very, very major undertaking, not only for facilities, but for our registrar. And so, and Lynn, please join in here if I'm not covering things accurately. I think that we absolutely need to maintain the ability to move courses or our entire instruction to an online or a Zoom format. But some of this logistically will be very, very difficult to implement in short order, even for spring semester as it relates to re-rooming all of our campus.
Oh, thanks, Rex. So right now, what we're going to do is, as Rex said, hope for the best and plan for the worst. And so what that means is for spring, we are going to hope that this peak of the COVID Delta variant will be over and we will have gotten through that. And so we are going to plan on our spring classes being in person as they were in fall of 19 and as they have been fall of 21. If we do need to go online, maybe we don't have to go online for the rest of the semester. So I know that a lot of institutions around the country are making decisions, as we are, about our mask mandate and other things 2 weeks at a time. So we are monitoring the situation daily and utilizing all of the different pieces of information that we can.
Okay, I don't have any additional questions, but if anything comes up after this, you're welcome to email me directly and I will anonymously send forward your question for an answer and then return it to you. Lynn, would you like to close us out today?
Sure. Honestly, I just want to thank all of you. Just the fact that you were here today shows how much you care for and about our students and their success. So thank you very, very much. And please know that whatever it is that we in Student Affairs or across the university can do, we will do to support you and your success as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for attending. Please, again, if you have questions, go ahead and send them to me. Have a good afternoon.